song yet by Natalie Lane that I just posted. It's got more words to it now. But coming from where we as a generation come from, which is 50 years out of the Jesus move, what I was reflecting was, what I was thinking was, some of the harsh things that seem to have happened to us, to our generation. I was just thinking, why was that? Why was that? See, you can't hear Natalie Lane coming from where I am without hearing Keith Green, can you? How many people are thinking Keith Green when they're hearing her sing? And Keith died in that plane crash. I mean, I can't explain to you the loss, because, you know, for anyone who's a musician, he was such a light. I mean, I suppose Larry Norman was the kind of light too. But Keith Green had this, well, I call it this third level quality. I think it comes when the John Cortale get really, really free, in the spirit anyway. Keith was a genius and would have gone on to amazing things, I'm sure, musically. Who knows? What about Graham Porkingham? I mean, that was the big thing. He was shot in a crossfire in a supermarket, or 10-11 or 7-Eleven or something, in America. And, you know, maybe things weren't as big by the time Lichtenberg arrived back into Houston or into America. Maybe things had dwindled, I don't know. But at the pinnacle of them impacting Britain, I can't tell you what I've posted about. That's where many of us got our first glimpse of working 3D body of Christ, because it was lived. There's a connection there in the spirit between those beings that went above meetings, and it spoke to us very deeply. And so, you know, he was just killed off, and that was the 80s. What else happened? Sam Fife. Those of you impacted by Sam Fife and the move and the messages coming out, they really took on board G.H. Warnock's booklet, The Feast of Tabernacles, 1951. He was a Baptist pastor, and then there were physical reasons going on in that. In the 70s, there was the oil crisis, the fuel crisis, and very early alert warnings about what might be coming upon the earth. And Tim LaHaye, wasn't it, who wrote the... Was it? No, it wasn't. Who wrote Late Great Planet Earth? Or was that the same guy? I've been saying all this wrong all this time. Sorry about this. Anyway, Sam Fife died. So he's delivering all this third level message, third feast message, along with all the other brethren. They're literally going almost continually throughout the earth, conference to conference, some regional far off spots. Well, they built all these end time farms, as they called them. And obviously it still carried on as a movement, but it was a massive, massive hit that he died in his own plane, in a plane crash. John Clark, who came with Nathel to our church, because we weren't actually in that move, but we did have these brethren passing through, he lost his son. I don't know how many sons they had. Maybe it was a second marriage, maybe it was their... I just don't know. But they lost their son. They asked us to pray for skin cancer that was affecting the son. And you know, nothing happened, and so he died. What a big thing. This is massive. And one of the last things I was thinking of was David Watson, such a big teacher in Times Square Church, such a prophetic voice into the nation, and just killed randomly, or it seems, by a drunk driver driving along roads. Those of you who remember Rich Novak, he's out there somewhere. He lived near where David Wilkerson. Did I say Watson or Wilson? David Wilkerson died. Did I say Watson? Because we have a teacher over here that died of cancer, throat cancer, called David Watson. And there were these attacks going on. So there were 3 attacks on people's throats. 2 died. Roger Price of the local Chichester Church Fellowship, and he had the vision of the body of Christ, which he'd got through Chard, South Chard. And David Watson was being used phenomenally among students in York, and anyone with a brain that then gets baptized in the Spirit, they have an amazing teaching role into nations. So I was thinking about all this. Why such big things allowed to be occurred? And then I thought of that verse, the Lord sits as head of the flood. So it's not like it's going on and he's helpless. He sits as head of the flood, and he is not as use God. Everything he allows for a specific purpose, because he sees something gazillions times bigger, and he sees the incarnation of his own Son in a many-membered form, described as the Son of Man, filling the earth. And also that, the talk of the righteous leaven, or the seed, the mustard seed, which grows to being the biggest of trees, and the leaven leavening the earth. All these things that evangelicals don't like talking about, because it threatens their Jesus coming again early to hoik me out of here sort of theology. This is what I believe. I believe the third feast message that I'm bringing, Sam Fife's bringing, all these others are bringing, is so big and so impactful that God isn't going to hoik us out of here yet. None of us even have a church that resembles Acts in our own locations yet. None of us have bound principalities and powers and created an open heaven, at least over the people, that are submitted to Jesus. Do we? We haven't done that. How are we ready to be the bride of Jesus? This is crazy. You're only living on a two stage of growth message. And if Americans hadn't formed America, we'd still be living on the European message of one stage. You can get forgiven and get stuffed. So you can manage. So Jesus can manage. Get forgiven and get stuffed. It's pathetic. So what we're looking at is a bigger picture. So why would all these... to you in this generation, you won't necessarily understand what it was like with the Jesus movement. It's still a fairly small voice into the earth, and to have these major people removed is huge. So why would God allow that? And I think this is the reason why. God has already seen the power of worship in heaven, but he has seen a third of those angels walk off. So as glorious as worship is, it is the very portal for the glory and presence and moving of God, right? But as glorious as that is, and he's also seen Jews with great teaching coming from Moses, coming from the revelation he gave Moses about this is how to have a people in the earth that sovereignly represent me. But with all that teaching, it in itself, a bit like the worship in heaven, it was meaningless really, because they decided to have a king who looked like all the other nations anyway. The kings brought in gradually, not beyond David, who followed hard after the heart of the Lord, but the other kings brought in more and more occult, and then the tribes were all dragged off, as God prophesied it would be if they disobeyed, and only 3 came back. So God has already seen teaching, and he's already seen worship, but what he is after is 3D. It is the birth of his son. So if people start idolising a Sam Fife, a Graham Pulkingham, a David Wilkerson, or whatever, or if it starts to be an impediment in the way of the true third feast, then sure, God will allow the enemy to pull some tricks, it seems to me. What do you think? Because this deification of meetings, this deification of teaching, isn't powerful enough. The only thing that's powerful is the amount of Jesus Christ we are eating live today. That's the only thing. The holy place is the holy place. The candlestick and the table of showbread. But it ain't where Jesus dwells. It ain't where Jesus himself dwells. That's what God is intent to have. Not just one pillar and cloud of fire, but living beings across the earth.